The storm and the stranger. The night sky burned with flashes of white, thunder rolling across the barren land like the roar of some angry beast. The human known as Kale stood at the doorway of his lonely shelter, watching the storm tear apart the alien wilderness around him. He had lived on this world for 2 years, far from other humans, surviving on simple tools and his will. The colony had failed, but he remained, building a life among ruins and silence. Rain hammered the ground, the soil turning into rivers of mud. Wind howled against the metal walls of his shelter. Kale was used to storms, but tonight felt different. The air carried a strange heaviness, a warning he could not explain. He closed the heavy door, checked the generator, and prepared for a long night alone. But he was not alone, not tonight. Through the storm, a sound reached his ears, faint, broken, almost lost beneath the thunder. It was a cry, human or not. Kale could not tell. His hand froze on the rifle leaning near the door. His instinct screamed danger, but his heart whispered something else. Without another thought, he pushed the door open and stepped into the chaos. The rain stung his face, blinding him. The light of his lantern cut only a small path through the storm. He followed the sound, each step sinking into the mud, and then he saw her. A figure lay half-hidden against the rocks, body trembling, skin marked with strange wounds. Her clothes were torn, her breathing shallow. Kale knelt beside her, brushing mud from her face. She was no human, not completely. Her eyes were larger, glowing faintly even in the darkness. Her features sharp, alien, but not monstrous. She tried to rise, but her strength failed. Her lips parted as if to speak, yet no words came. Only pain, only silence. Kale hesitated, rifle still slung across his back. What if she was dangerous? What if she was a scout, an enemy, or worse? But the storm was merciless. If he left her here, she would not survive the night. With a grunt, he lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, fragile, almost weightless. He carried her back to his shelter, every step hard against the screaming wind. By the time he closed the door behind them, his clothes were soaked and her pulse was faint. Kale laid her on the cot, lighting another lantern to push away the shadows. He studied her carefully. Her wounds were deep, claw marks across her shoulder, burns along her arm. What kind of creature had done this to her? He cleaned the cuts, wrapped them with cloth, and placed a blanket over her body. For hours, the storm raged outside, and Kale sat nearby, listening to her shallow breathing. He told himself this was only temporary, that he was simply saving a life. Yet something about her presence unsettled him. She was not a random traveler. He could feel it, something about the way she had been lying near his home. Too close, too deliberate. At one point, she stirred. Her eyes opened, glowing faint gold under the lantern light. For a moment, they locked onto him, studying him with strange intensity. Kale felt as if she was not just looking at him, but through him, searching for something hidden. "You are safe," he said quietly, unsure if she understood his words. She blinked slowly, her gaze never leaving his face. Then, with effort, she whispered one broken word, a word in a language Kale did not know. Her voice carried weight, as if it was not just a sound but a message. Then she fell unconscious again, leaving only questions behind. The storm outside began to weaken, thunder rolling into silence. Kale leaned back in his chair, staring at the stranger. His mind turned over thoughts he could not silence. Who was she? Why was she here, on this remote and ruined world? And most of all, why did he feel as though her appearance was not an accident? As the first calm after the storm settled, Kale realized something. She had been close to his shelter, far too close. It was no coincidence. This stranger had not simply wandered into his life by chance. She had been tracking him, and though he did not yet know it, his decision to open the door tonight would change everything. The hidden tension. The storm was gone, but its echo lingered across the barren world. Raindrops clung to the shelter's windows, glowing faintly under the weak light of the moons. Inside, Kale worked in silence, checking the generator, boiling water, sharpening the edge of his knife. His movements were steady, almost calm. yet his eyes always drifted back toward the corner where the stranger lay. She had not moved since collapsing into unconsciousness. Wrapped in a blanket, her breathing shallow, she looked fragile, yet Kale could not forget the way her eyes had locked on him the night before. That gaze had not been the look of a helpless victim. It had been sharp, watchful, almost calculating. Hours passed before she stirred again. Slowly, she sat up, her body weak but her eyes burning with strange light. Kale offered her water, holding the cup steady when her hand trembled. She drank carefully, never breaking her gaze from him. He expected words of thanks, maybe fear, but she gave neither. Instead, she studied the room. Every corner, every tool, every weapon stacked neatly along the wall. "You are safe here," Kale said, his voice low. He kept his rifle leaning against the table, close enough to reach. He was not sure if he meant the words for her or for himself. She tilted her head, as if trying to understand. Then she spoke, her voice soft but strange. The words were broken, heavy with an accent, human alone. The way she said it made Kale pause. It was not a question, it was a statement, as if she already knew. Kale frowned. "Yes, I live here alone." He tried to keep his tone casual, but suspicion lingered beneath. "What about you? Where are your people?" She looked away, her lips tightening. For a moment, she seemed to weigh her answer. Finally, she whispered, "Gone." Then she closed her eyes, shutting the door to any more questions. The silence between them grew heavy. Outside, the wind whistled through the cracks of the barren hills. Inside, only the hum of the generator filled the air. Kale returned to his work, but his mind stayed restless. This woman was not telling him everything. And yet, despite the unease, he found himself leaving food near her bed, checking her bandages, even adjusting the blanket when she shivered. That night, Kale tried to sleep, but his instincts kept him awake. Something felt wrong. He rose quietly, moving through the shelter. At first, all seemed normal. Then he saw it. The storage door had been opened slightly. His supplies, carefully organized, were disturbed. Not stolen, not destroyed, but examined. Someone had touched them. He turned sharply, his hand reaching for the rifle. In the dim light, he saw her, standing barefoot near the shelves, her wounded arm hanging weak, but her eyes sharp. "What are you doing?" Kale's voice cut through the room. She froze, then turned slowly. "Food," she whispered, but Kale knew it was a lie. Her hands had not been on the food. They had been tracing the maps, the notes, the strange device he had recovered from the ruins months ago. Kale's jaw tightened. He did not raise the rifle, but his grip on it grew firm. She stared at him, and for a long moment, neither moved. The only sound was the drip of water from her hair onto the metal floor. Finally, she lowered her head and returned to the bed, curling under the blanket as if nothing had happened. Kale watched her for a long time, his thoughts turning dark. The next day passed in uneasy quiet. She spoke little, only short words, but Kale noticed her eyes. They followed him with care, tracking his every movement. Every time he left the room, her gaze shifted to his notes, to the shelves, to the door locks. She was measuring him, studying him, and Kale felt it with every passing hour. By the second night, Kale realized something unsettling. This stranger was not just a wounded traveler who had stumbled into his life. She was observing him, calculating him. And though he had given her shelter, he could not escape the feeling that he was the one trapped inside the cage. When he finally lay down to sleep, his rifle resting near his hand, Kale whispered to himself, "You're hiding something." He glanced at the silent figure under the blanket, her golden eyes half closed but awake, always awake. She had been tracking him. He knew it now. The storm had not brought her to his door. She had been waiting, watching, long before the rain fell. And in the stillness of the night, Kale realized a chilling truth. He had saved her life, but she might not have come to him for rescue. She had come for him. The silent hunter. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Kale continued his routine, hunting small game, repairing tools, and tending the crops outside the shelter. But his mind never left the stranger resting inside. She had begun to move on her own, slow at first, but with surprising strength for someone who had nearly died in the storm. Every time Kale returned from outside, he noticed small changes. A map shifted a few inches on the table. The lock of the storage box scratched near the edges. His rifle moved slightly from its resting place. She did not steal, she did not break, but she touched, examined, studied. Her eyes always followed him, sharp and unblinking. She was no longer the helpless, wounded figure he had carried through the rain. She was recovering quickly, too quickly, and her quiet nature was not a guest. It was the patience of a hunter waiting for the right moment. One evening, as Kale skinned a creature by the fire, he saw her reflection in the knife's blade. She was not watching the fire or the food. She was watching him. Her golden eyes glowed faintly, unreadable. When he turned to meet her gaze, she looked away, pretending to study the walls of the shelter. Kale's chest tightened. He had survived too long on this world to ignore instinct. Something about her felt wrong. She knew the land too well, more than a stranger should. He had caught her staring at the horizon, her eyes narrowing, as if she could see paths invisible to him. That night, Kale could not sleep. He rose quietly and stepped outside into the cold night air. The moons hung low, casting silver light across the wet earth. His boots sank into the mud as he circled the shelter. Then he stopped. Tracks, not just his, not from the storm, fresh marks in the soil leading toward the rocks. He knelt down, running his fingers over them. They were small, deliberate, and recent, too recent. His pulse quickened. He followed the prints carefully, step by step. They curve around the rocks, leading to a vantage point overlooking his shelter, a perfect spot to watch him without being seen. Kale's stomach turned cold. Someone had been tracking him long before the storm. He scanned the darkness, hand resting on his rifle, but the night was silent. No movement, only shadows. When he returned to the shelter, she was awake, sitting upright under the blanket. Her gaze locked on him the moment he entered, as if she had known exactly where he had gone. Kale set his rifle aside and pretended to be calm, though his heart thundered in his chest. "You were outside," she said. Her words were broken but clear enough. "Checking the land," Kale replied. Keeping his tone flat, he moved to the fire, adding wood. His mind worked quickly. Should he confront her, demand the truth, or wait? She tilted her head, studying him in silence. For a moment, Kale thought she might speak more, reveal something, but she only whispered, "Danger, close." Then she closed her eyes and lay back down. Kale stared at her, unsure whether it was a warning or a threat. The next day, the tension deepened. While Kale worked outside, he saw her standing near the cliff edge. Her wound should have kept her weak, but her posture was strong. She moved with grace, her body balanced like a fighter. And when the wind shifted, Kale caught the faint gleam of a blade hidden beneath her clothes. His suspicions hardened into certainty. She was no lost traveler. She was armed, skilled, and deliberate. That night, Kale placed his rifle closer to his bed. He did not close his eyes fully. Every sound in the shelter felt louder. The hum of the generator, the drip of water, the faint shift of her breathing. And then, just before dawn, he heard it. Footsteps, light and careful. She was moving again. Kale held his breath. Listening, the sound drew closer to the storage room, then paused. He rose slowly, gripping the rifle. His heart pounded as he stepped into the shadows, watching. She stood there, one hand on the storage lock, her golden eyes shining in the dim lantern light. Not weak, not broken, but calm, controlled like a predator. For the first time, Kale saw her clearly, not as a victim, but as what she truly was, a silent hunter. And though she had accepted his shelter, he realized she had not come seeking safety. She had come seeking him. The bond of survival. The uneasy silence between Kale and the stranger did not last long. The barren land beyond the shelter had its own dangers, and soon those dangers came closer than either of them expected. It began with a sound in the distance, a low growl that carried through the rocky hills. Kale froze where he stood, his hands tightening on the half-built fence he had been repairing. He knew that sound. The predators of this world were not many, but the few that survived the harsh storms were deadly. When he turned, he saw her, the stranger, already standing at the cliff's edge. Her golden eyes narrowed, her posture alert. Wounded or not, she moved with precision, like someone who had lived through battles before. She spoke only one word: beast. Kale grabbed his rifle, scanning the horizon. The growl came again, louder this time, followed by the shifting of heavy bodies through the brush. Then they appeared, shapes moving fast across the rocks. Four-legged creatures with armored hides and glowing eyes, hunting in a pack. He cursed under his breath. His shelter had kept him safe from storms, but not from these things alone. He could drive them off, perhaps, but with her wounded, the odds shifted. Yet when he looked at her, he saw no fear. She straightened, pulling a short blade from beneath her torn clothes. The sight confirmed his suspicion. She had been armed all along. "Stay back," Kale said, raising his rifle. But she ignored him, stepping forward, her stance balanced. The beasts attacked as one. Their bodies leapt through the air, claws slicing at the wind. Kale fired, the rifle cracking loud. One beast fell, but another closed the gap, teeth snapping toward him. He stumbled back, firing again, but the shot went wide. Then she moved. Her blade cut through the night with stunning speed, precise and controlled. The creature screamed as she struck deep. She pivoted, spun, and struck again. Her movements were not those of a desperate survivor. They were the movements of a trained fighter. Together, they fought, Kale firing into the pack, she striking with deadly accuracy. Their actions were rough but strangely in rhythm. When one beast lunged at Kale's side, she was there, blade flashing. When another tried to circle her, Kale's rifle barked, driving it back. By the time the last creature limped into the shadows, silence fell again. Their breaths came heavy, sweat mixing with dirt. Kale lowered his rifle, his eyes fixed on her. She stood tall despite her wounds, golden eyes burning bright. Her blade dripped with dark blood. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she finally looked at him and said, "You fight strong." Her words were broken but clear. Kale frowned, wiping mud from his hands. "So do you," he replied. His tone was cautious, but beneath it, something else stirred, a recognition that survival had tied them together in a way words could not. They returned to the shelter without speaking much, yet the silence between them had changed. It was no longer the silence of mistrust alone. It carried the weight of shared danger, shared survival. Inside, Kale cleaned his rifle, his eyes flicking to her as she sat by the fire, sharpening her blade with practiced ease. He wanted to ask her questions about her people, her training, why she had tracked him, but he did not. Not yet. Instead, he watched the steady motion of her hands, the calm way she handled the weapon, as if it were part of her body. That night, as the fire burned low, Kale found himself studying her not only with suspicion, but with a strange, reluctant respect. She was dangerous, yes, but also skilled. And in this hostile world, skill meant survival. Still, in the quiet moments, his thoughts turned dark. He remembered the tracks near his shelter, the way she had searched his supplies, the way she seemed to know things she should not. She had fought beside him. Yes, but trust was not earned so easily. As the moons rose high, Kale whispered to himself, "We fight together." But for how long? The stranger, lying near the fire with her eyes half closed, shifted slightly, as if she had heard him. Her lips curved into the faintest trace of a smile, one that held no comfort, only mystery. For now, survival had bound them. But Kale knew bonds forged in battle could break as quickly as they formed. The reveal of secrets. The fire inside the shelter burned low, casting long shadows against the metal walls. Kale sat at the table, turning an old knife in his hand. The stranger lay nearby, her wounds healing faster than seemed natural. Her breathing was steady, but her golden eyes were half open, watching, always watching. It had been days since the attack of the beasts, and though they had fought side by side, Kale's unease had only deepened. He had given her food, water, and a place to rest, but in return, she gave him only silence, broken words, and eyes that never looked away. That night, as the wind howled faintly outside, Kale heard something. At first, he thought it was the whisper of the storm returning, but then he realized the sound came from inside the shelter, a voice soft, low, speaking words in a language he did not know. He rose quietly, his rifle close, moving toward the corner where she lay. Her lips moved slowly, whispering into the dark. It was not a prayer, not a dream. It was speech deliberate and heavy. Her tone carried a rhythm, as if she spoke to someone unseen. Cale's heart pounded. Was she calling out to others? Was she sending a message? He leaned closer, careful not to reveal himself. He could not understand the words, but the intent was clear. She was not helpless. She had a purpose. When her eyes opened suddenly, Cale froze for a moment. He thought she had caught him spying, but she did not move. She simply stared at the ceiling, her whisper fading into silence. Then she turned her head toward him, golden eyes glowing faintly. "You listen," she said softly. Her voice was calm, not surprised, not afraid. Cale gripped the rifle tighter. "Who were you speaking to?" he asked. Her lips curved slightly, almost a smile, but her eyes remained cold. "Not you," she answered, and closed them again. Cale returned to his chair, but his mind was restless. He could no longer deny it. She had been tracking him, watching him, and now, speaking to someone beyond his reach. The question burned in his mind. Why? The answer came sooner than he expected. The next morning, Cale woke to find her standing near the storage door again. This time, she did not hide her actions. She held the strange device he had kept buried under maps and supplies, the one piece of old tech he had recovered from the ruins months ago, a device he had never managed to understand. "What are you doing?" Cale demanded, his voice sharp. She turned slowly, the device glowing faintly in her hands, her golden eyes locked onto his. "Yours?" she asked. Cale stepped forward, anger rising. "Yes, mine, put it down." She tilted her head, studying him. "You do not know," she whispered. Her voice carried something new, certainty. "Know what?" Cale asked. She held the device up, its faint light reflecting on her face. "This," she said, "is why I came." Cale's blood ran cold. His suspicion had been right all along. She had not stumbled to his door by chance. She had come for him, or rather, for what he had. "What is it?" he pressed. Her silence stretched long. Then finally she spoke. "Beacon," she said. "Signal, strong, dangerous, many seek." The words hit him like a blow. He had kept it all this time, thinking it was nothing more than broken tech. Now he realized it was far more. It was the reason she had tracked him, the reason she had risked the storm. "You've been lying," Cale said, his voice low. Her golden eyes narrowed. "Survive," she replied simply, as if the word explained everything. For a moment, the air in the shelter felt heavier. Cale stood tense, the rifle in his hands. She stood calm, the beacon glowing faintly in hers, their trust, fragile and thin, shattered like glass. And yet, before Cale could act, a sound broke the silence. Distant, faint, but growing, the echo of engines, the rhythm of marching, shapes moving beyond the hills. She looked toward the door, her face hardening. "They come," she whispered. Cale's grip tightened. His life had changed the night he pulled her from the storm. But now, with the beacon glowing and enemies approaching, he realized the truth. He had not saved her life. He had brought danger to his own. The clash of truths. The faint hum of engines grew louder with every passing moment. Cale stood frozen in the middle of the shelter, his rifle clutched in both hands. Across from him, the stranger held the beacon, its glow casting strange shadows across her sharp features. Their eyes locked, two survivors trapped by fate, bound together by lies now laid bare. "You knew," Cale said, his voice steady but low. "From the very beginning, you knew about this." She did not deny it. Her golden eyes held his without flinching. "I watched," she answered softly. "I followed. I waited." The words struck like a blade. All the unease, all the restless nights, they had not been his imagination. She had been hunting him, not for who he was, but for what he carried. "Why?" Cale demanded. "Why track me? Why not just take it? You could have killed me that first night." Her gaze flickered for the first time, showing a shadow of conflict. "Not kill," she whispered. "Understand, human, survive storms, beasts, hunger. Why you live when others die. I needed to see." Cale shook his head, disbelief twisting in his chest. "So I was an experiment to you, a puzzle to solve." She stepped closer, the beacon glowing brighter in her hands. "Not puzzle," she said, "hope." The word stunned him. Hope? He had lived years in isolation, believing the galaxy had forgotten him. Yet now this alien woman stood before him, calling him something more. But there was no time to question further outside. The rumble of engines drew closer. Kale moved to the door, peering through a narrow gap. His heart sank. Dark shapes moved across the hills. Armored figures, alien soldiers, their weapons gleaming under the moons. They were not beasts, not raiders, but an organized force, and they were coming straight toward the shelter. "They tracked the beacon," Kale said, his voice grim, "and you led them here." She flinched, but only slightly. "I led them away," she said, "but they found, always they find." The clash between them deepened. Trust broken, yet survival demanded choices. Kale turned on her, rifle raised. "Give it to me," he ordered. She looked at him calmly, no fear in her eyes. "If I give, you die," she said. "If I keep, maybe you live." Kale's finger tightened on the trigger. Suspicion and rage burned in him. Yet beneath it was the memory of her standing beside him against the beasts, the memory of her blade flashing to save his life. He had seen her fight not just for herself, but for him. "Why should I trust you now?" Kale asked, his voice sharp. Her golden eyes softened for the first time. "Because I already had a chance to end you," she said. "Storm night. You sleep, I watch, I could strike, I did not." The words cut deep. Kale lowered the rifle slightly. His mind churned. Was she enemy or reluctant ally? The line blurred. The pounding of boots echoed closer. Soldiers spreading in formation. Voices shouting in a harsh alien tongue. Kale could feel the ground shake beneath their march. He looked at her once more. "What do they want with me?" he asked. Her answer was simple, heavy. "Not you," she said. "Beacon, but you in way." Kale understood then. If the beacon was the prize, he was nothing more than an obstacle. If he gave her up, maybe they would let him live, but the thought twisted his stomach. Survival was not worth betrayal. Not like this. The door rattled as the first soldiers reached the shelter. Kale raised his rifle again, breath steady. His eyes met hers. "Then we fight together," he said. She gave a single nod, her blade sliding into her hand. For the first time since she arrived, her expression shifted. No longer guarded, no longer distant, but fierce, united. The soldiers outside prepared to strike, the shelter walls shaking with the force of their weapons. Inside, Kale and the stranger stood side by side, two survivors against the tide. Their truths had clashed, trust had shattered, but in the face of death, they had only one choice: to stand together. And in that moment, Kale understood the strange bond between them, not built on trust, not built on truth, but on survival itself. The final choice. The shelter shook as the first blast struck the door. Dust rained from the ceiling. Kale gripped his rifle tight, the sound of marching feet and alien voices echoing outside. The stranger stood beside him, her blade ready, the beacon glowing faintly in her other hand. Another strike came, the metal door bending inward. Kale's heart pounded. He had fought storms, beasts, hunger, but never this, never an army. He looked at her, suspicion and trust battling inside him. She had brought this danger, but she was also the only one standing with him now. "They will break through," Kale said, his voice harsh. She nodded, her eyes glowing gold in the firelight. "Then we break them first." The door crashed open, armored soldiers pouring inside. Their weapons fired bolts of burning light. Kale dove behind the table, firing back. The stranger moved with terrifying grace, her blade slicing through armor, each strike precise and final. Together they fought, Kale's rifle cracking loud, her blade flashing bright. The shelter filled with smoke, sparks, and screams. The enemy was many, but Kale and the stranger moved as one. When he faltered, she struck. When she stumbled, his bullets cut the path. Yet the soldiers kept coming, wave after wave, pushing them back into the heart of the shelter. Kale's breath grew ragged. His rifle grew hot. Sweat burned his eyes. He knew they could not hold much longer. In the chaos, one soldier's blast struck near the beacon. The glow pulsed wildly, humming like a heartbeat. The stranger snatched it up, her expression fierce. "This is what they want," she shouted over the roar of battle. "If I stay, they follow. If I go, they chase me." Kale froze. The choice hit him harder than the storm ever had. She was offering herself as bait, to lead the army away, to draw them from him. But if she left, he would be alone again, alone in silence, alone in a world that had nearly broken him. "No," Kale growled. "You won't survive out there alone." Her golden eyes met his steady and calm. "I survived before you, I survive again," she said. "But you human, you must live. That is why I came, to see why you fight, why you endure, and now I know." Kale's chest tightened. In her voice there was no deception, no calculation, only certainty. She had followed him, hunted him, but in the end, she had chosen to stand beside him. The soldiers pressed closer, fire lighting the walls. Kale's rifle clicked empty. He drew his knife, ready for the final stand, but she stepped forward, raising the beacon high. The glow burst brighter, filling the room with searing light. The soldiers flinched, covering their eyes. "Go," she whispered to Kale. Her blade flashed once more, cutting through the nearest soldier. Her movements were furious, desperate, but controlled. Each strike was her last gift, a path for him to escape. Kale hesitated, his hand tightening on the doorframe. His mind screamed to stay, to fight with her, but deep inside, he knew the truth. If he stayed, both would die. If he left, maybe one of them would live. The last thing he saw was her figure, golden eyes blazing, standing against the army like a shadow of fire. Her voice carried through the chaos, sharp and clear. Live, human, that is the choice. Kale ran into the night, the stormless sky above him, the sound of battle fading behind. His legs carried him across the barren land, heart torn between guilt and survival. The beacon's glow lit the horizon for a moment longer, then vanished, swallowed by darkness. Silence fell across the hills. Kale stumbled, falling to his knees. His chest heaved, sweat and ash burning his skin. He had lost her, the stranger who had once been his hunter, then his ally. Her fate was unknown, but her words burned within him. Live, human. Kale rose slowly, staring at the distant stars. The world around him was broken, the night heavy with danger. Yet something inside him had changed. He was no longer surviving for himself alone. He carried her choice, her sacrifice, her faith. The storm had brought her to his door, but it was his decision to open it that had begun everything. And though she was gone, the bond they forged in battle would not die. Kale whispered into the empty night, "You hunted me, you lied to me, but in the end, you saved me." His voice broke, but he did not stop walking. He would not stop, because survival was no longer enough. He had to live, truly live. And somewhere in the shadows beyond the hills, he believed she still watched, golden eyes unbroken.